Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Tanya Talks. I'm your host and your Tanya Ricketts, and tonight we are joined with a full panel. I'm excited about this conversation. It is the state of our children's mental health in high performance environments. I have a panel of guests here tonight. We have Karen Rose, who is from PhysioFunction, physiotherapist. We have couple Sean and Lisa Gonsalves from Gonsalves Home Real Estate, and we have Hayley Deans, who is from CANUSAstudy, helping your kids, get scholarships within universities within the U.S. So, welcome, guys, tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for
So,
having us.
yeah, this is going to be fun. Like, I'm almost nervous having all of you guys on it.
Well, we've
It's going to
been
be pretty
begging to
heated,
come
I think.
on.
It's going to be pretty heated. It's going to be pretty heated. Only because we all have children who are in high performance space environments. They're all athletes, all of us, all of our kids, right across the board. Whether we have 3 kids or 2 kids, right across the board. So we have a full plate. We don't talk enough. We talk about a lot of things when our kids are in these arenas, in these environments. We talk a lot about their physical health. We talk about how we maintain them nutritionally, but we rarely talk about what it means to sustain them mentally. There are a lot of challenges that come in these environments of having athletes, have to go through all this stuff. So I'm going to open up with you, Sean, and just ask you, give us some insight into your world with your children and what the state of their mental health is and how you help manage that.
So, we have 3 kids, first of all, a son and then 2 girls. And let me start by saying every athlete and child handles it differently. One child may suppress it more, the other might be a little bit more visual. So, first of all, we had to kind of dig, right, to see how they were doing mentally. And as time goes on, they progress, they get a little better at handling things, and then some things get more severe as the level increases. So a couple of things that we saw, first of all, we saw a loss of confidence at time to time. When you're competing at a high level, every athlete's going to suffer a loss of confidence, and that can spiral. You know, I play baseball, and a hitting slump is probably, I don't know, it's one of the most emotionally damaging things I've ever gone through. You just question your self-worth. What am I doing in this game, right? I suck. And then that thought just spirals down. So we saw a lot of confidence issues. We saw fear. Performing at that level, we know in our society that when kids progress to a higher level, it's about winning. It's about that result. And in hindsight, I wish I kind of took the focus off of that. We never told our kids they have to win, but I think we should have diverted a little bit their focus from that, because when you base it all on that goal, it's a win or lose thing. So there was fear to perform, and there was a lot of pressure, a ton of anxiety. We've seen bullying as well in these environments. Now, our kids, I don't think they had a bad experience, but these are just things we saw collectively as a family. We also saw, again, the perfectionism. So, how did we manage it? Like, we didn't know until we were in it that the kids were suffering. And, if I had to rewind the clocks and go back, as a parent, I would have done things very differently. And as a coach, because I coached my son through hockey and baseball, I would have approached things totally differently. The skills are one thing. You know, we as parents spend thousands of dollars on the best stick, the best shoes, the best glove, and most of us spend zero on coaching the head. So it wasn't until later we were introduced to performance coaches, and it was the best thing we did. I wish we started it earlier. Um, and it's not that the performance coach is any genius, but they're going to talk to your child and package these ideas, these coping skills in a package that that they can understand and they can relate to. Because I think it comes down to coping. Um, Coping with pressure, fear, the confidence loss, and all those things. So we introduced performance coaches to our kids, and it definitely made a huge difference. In some cases, I would laugh and I'd be like, I told you the exact same thing. I just spent 200
100
bucks.
times.
I spent 200 bucks and he told you the exact same thing. And he would come back and say, oh, I had this, Cassidy gave me this great idea and it was this. I said, son, I said that to you a month ago. I said that to you when you were 5, but they receive it differently because I'm a parent. I don't know anything, right? So that was one big thing. I think I would have focused more on the journey of the athletic career instead of the day-to-day results and trying to make them better athletes. I would have kind of glorified, hey, look, the experience you're having. You're getting to go to all these countries, you're meeting all your friends. These are things that we as parents put them in sports, but we don't remind the kids that's why they're there, right? So I think I would have focused a lot more on and talking about the journey of their athletic career. Keeping them present, I think, is another big thing. Forget the past. It's gone. You struck out, you fell off the beam, even you got hurt, you had a bad experience with your coach. Leave it alone, forget it, let's move forward. So yeah, there's a ton of things I would have done differently. I would have introduced the mental side of it, performance coaching. I would have talked about breathing. I would have focused more on nutrition and recovery techniques. You see athletes now. I read an article today about Duncan Keith, who's 37. He's been in the NHL for how many years, and he's performing at top level in the league still, and it's because of what he does off the ice. So hindsight's 2020, but that's what I would have done. I don't know if you have something to add there, Elise.
Yeah, that honestly, there's, if I had to relive it, I would probably take a different approach. But some of the things that really stand out is, there's a perfectionism that can really warp your sense of reality. So I'm finding that, it has to be 100% or nothing. There's no in between. And that really spirals into some deep-seated anxiety issues. And that's really concerning these days. And I think, having an athlete at a high level, it is such demanding on their time that I don't think they know anything else. And that is a real worry, because at some point these sports end, and I don't know if they may have the best technique and all that, but can they cope with the everyday life after sport? That is, the jury's still out on that one, because we're not quite there yet, but I can see that there are worry signs coming. Self-worth, self-confidence, and just, what do I do when that sport is gone? So yeah, lots to consider that I don't think we ever thought about when we signed them up for their first day of gymnastics and hockey and baseball. We didn't see beyond the next practice. So yeah, would have definitely done things differently.
It's interesting to hear other people's experiences. I guess this is not something that we usually do, is talk to other parents about what our kids are going through. And
Sure.
I've had a completely different experience with my kids in sports. And I think it comes from the fact that when we introduce them, I see sports, well, soccer is my children's sport. It's a sport that I played as well. And I introduced them to sports because I wanted them to learn life lessons. I wanted them to learn how to work in a group. I wanted them to learn how to cope with challenges, and how to, succeed at a goal together in a unit that you might not like everybody. I thought that those were important life lessons to learn. And so those are the things that we have always focused on when they're going through their sporting endeavors. And so, when we're talking about their self-worth and anxiety and things like that, those are something that my husband and I address immediately, because that's why, for me anyways, that's why they're there, is to learn those things. So I think on a flip side, hearing Sean and Lisa, what you guys would have done differently is actually what we're doing right now. Our children are a little bit younger than yours. And to allow them to grow as people. I think that good athletes are, or successful athletes, I guess, are successful people in life. And those are the things that we have focused on in growing our children in the athletic world, is more about growing them as people as opposed to growing them as athletes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, if I look at my experience with my children, it was definitely, or it can definitely be an emotional roller coaster. When things are going great, they do really well, and of course, when things aren't, both my kids are different, but essentially had the same role. In the early years, gymnastics was an individual sport. At university, it's a team sport, so it was very different to adjust to that. So the self-worth in gymnastics is solely attached to your performance as an individual. And when things aren't going well, which inevitably they will, my daughter pegged her self-worth on what she was doing at the time. So, what I did, some of the things that I did was always try and try to get them to remember, her to remember all of the good things, because their mind completely focuses on all the negatives. So I remember one time I gave her an exercise. I gave her a packet of yellow stickies and said, listen, because everything I heard was, I can't do this, I can't do that, this isn't working, what good am I, I'm no good. And so I gave her a package of yellow stickies, and I'm like, in that wall in your closet, I want you to stick on something that you have done well, on that sticky. And she was like, I'm not going to have anything to put down. So I said, well, what about this? You just learned your triple twist, you just did this. And it probably took about maybe 2 weeks for her to get going, to acknowledge there were things that were positive and good. And probably after that 2 weeks, the inside of her closet was filled with yellow stickies. So it's there. It's just that they focus on the negative.
Mhm.
My son, is a soccer player, was a striker. So when he's out there scoring all the goals, everybody's patting him on the back and he's a great player. And then when you get into that slump where you're not scoring, it's like, he's like, totally like, I'm not doing well. And it's like, yeah, well, it's a team. Somebody still has to feed you the ball. So you have to get it somehow. So, but his whole thing was, I'm crappy. And because I can't score the goals, my team is no good. So put all of that weight on their shoulders. So it's always to try and listen to what they're saying and then kind of bring them back to reality, to not focus completely on the negative. And I think when they recognize that there's positives in there, it helps to build back their confidence. But it definitely can be, like, I think for both my kids, it was just completely tunnel vision on the negative at that time, and it was, our role was to bring them out of that.
One
And
of the
it's
things,
hard to not be in tunnel vision when you come out of there, and we may be looking to revive them, but they've got to go back into that environment and be back into expecting, like, that negativity starts all over again the next day. So it's
Yeah.
like a double-edged sword.
yeah, I mean, the good thing, Haley, about your kids, and I'll say about our kids too, they talked. You know, it wasn't, you know, they expressed themselves, which was great when they were feeling pressure, because that AAA hockey in your draft year, or any of these girls that are level 10 and doing their thing, a lot of kids hold it in, right? And they won't tell you that they're being mistreated, or they won't tell you that they feel incredible amount of anxiety. And I think the good thing about our kids was that they spoke about it. They kind of told us a lot of the times, I just don't feel confident, and or I'm scared to get on the ice. And then you can address it, you can help them and rebuild some of that confidence, right? But the communication with them, is huge. But if you're one of those parents that's applying pressure, they're not going to talk. And you're going to find out when it's too late, which is something we all should avoid, right?
Yeah, I think listening mode is because my kids are, in their early years, they weren't big talkers. So I would plant myself at the gym. I would observe, what I'm seeing. I would go to soccer practices. I would observe what I'm seeing and then start the conversation because it wasn't naturally flowing to me. Now, eventually as an adult, like when my daughter went away to school in the US, and thank goodness, because I don't know if anybody remembers the Nassar scandal. Well, that was her university. That was their team doctor. And it was really important that we knew. And she spoke to us about what was happening on the team with, the other athletes, because when the chips are down, like big things like that, you really need to have open communication. And so she kind of grew into the communication and grew into the confidence, and I would say grew into the assertiveness. Um, for her, not a very assertive person. My son, very assertive, but two different people, but you need the communication from all of them. And sometimes if it wasn't coming, then I would go and watch training. I would watch practice. So I could see for myself, is everything really going bad? And I'll be like, no, that's good. It's just, maybe that one skill on that one event, or, what, it was the last two games, you didn't score. Like, everybody doesn't score all the time. And,
Yeah.
take the pressure off yourself, play the game, remember your fundamentals, and, the goals will come, right? So.
And I find it, I don't know about anyone else, but I find that the expectation once you get to a certain level from the coaches, and I'm only going to speak out of my experience, was we're in an individual sport, gymnastics, it's not a team sport. So you were expected to show up at that training and there was no communication. You don't talk to anybody, you just go in for 5 to 6 hours, you focus on your skills. So there wasn't that opportunity to learn how to interact with other people. It was just you learned how to go in there, do what you had to do. And if you didn't do what you had to do and do it to perfection, then it was like, well, don't waste my time. Let's move on. So, you're managing that and at that age, you're very vulnerable. You want that acceptance, you want that social interaction, and you're doing your best to accommodate all of it. And it's just a lot for these, I'm going to say girls, because we were in the girls' sport of gymnastics. It's a lot for these girls to manage.
I think that that's one of the things, our role, I guess, as parents is the communication. I would agree with both of you, is that I think that when your children are in high level sports, you are not just the parent, you are the best friend, because of their time commitments. They might not have the same social interactions with people their own age, or you are their mental health coach because you might not have that. And I think that there's so many roles that we as parents, different hats, I guess, that we wear to support them through that. And if we ourselves are not prepared for that or don't realize that that's coming, we can run into problems. They slip through the hole, or we don't notice that they're suffering or struggling with something. That our time or our ability to observe has to be on notch, because it is so easy for people to slip through the cracks, and then it gets too late, I guess, to be able to bring them back.
Mm-hmm. And even the pressure with the bullying that happens behind the scenes that a lot of people don't talk about with the peer bullying, and it's unbelievable how much bullying goes on, how much mind games, and I'm going to speak for myself, the mind games that go on with other athletes to, they're tearing you down so that they can go ahead, and it's just it's mind blowing.
Sad too.
Do you think that that's any different though than what happens in life? Like, as people become more successful, whether it's in a job or a career or whatnot, that there's always, we call them haters. There's always somebody who, like, there's two types of people in the world, in my opinion. There's people who are pushing you towards your goal and people who are pulling you away from your goal. And very quickly, you need to identify who they are, because if they're not the ones that are pushing you towards your goal, then you've got to be able to step back and say, okay, let me see where that's coming from and whether I'm going to give it credit or not.
Yeah, totally agree with you. My husband used to always say kind of, know who's talking, who's chirping in your ear, right? And what are their motivations? Because you're right. Somebody might be trying to get your confidence very low so that, they can beat the star. And it's hard for them because, sometimes they're quite naive and they think, well, everybody's being nice to me and everybody wants to see me do well. And it's not always the case.
Everybody's nodding there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's biting their tongue on national TV.
Well,
I
think
it makes me angry.
It's life.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, like, I think that you just got to step back and say and realize that that is life, right? We just have to experience it in high level sports. But I mean, is there anybody who doesn't see that at work or in their career or whatnot? That life doesn't have to be about me stepping on somebody to get ahead in the world. And but there are people who feel that way, and there are people who succeed that way as well. And it's just part of this wonderful world that we live in. And I think that learning how to deal with different personalities is part of that growth as a person. It just happens to be, I don't know, I can't even say if it's more intense in sports.
And I think it varies per child, because I know for a fact that, you can have a child go through that experience and they just won't take to all the positive of how you're looking for them to recognize how it's developing them for life. And this is part of life. Not all child gravitates towards that teaching, and it's hard for them to come out of that space, and it's crippling and damaging. And I know firsthand, sometimes it's not that easy. And what do we do in those situations? The jury's still out, because I haven't figured that out. But one child can say something to that other athlete, one athlete to another athlete, to hold them back, and they get in their head. And it's like it's hell to get it out. It's like looking at a bad picture, and it's hard to get that bad picture out. It can be murderous trying to get that out of that image or that voice or that saying or whatever that is out of that child. It can be very challenging.
It's
Yeah, and
rewiring the thoughts.
Yes.
Right. And that's going back to coping skills and all that stuff. And I've experienced, I'm sure everybody here has experienced it. How do you rewire that child's thinking about it and get them to move past it? I don't know.
I'm still the jury's.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you rewire it. You just let them know that that's how their brain works, and everybody's is different. So like, my daughter, like if a coach said to her, "Oh, you're never going to be this level, or you're never going to be able to do that," or she would be so kind of, if anybody said anything, she would take that as the truth, as opposed to say, well, I think I can do something. It took her quite a while. Like if somebody told me, like actually when I was doing gymnastics, when I first started, my coach told me, you're not going to win provincials. It's your first year. You're competing against blah, 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 blah. So in my head, I know I'm like, well, who's he to tell me I'm not going to win?
Right.
I can win if I want, but my daughter would be, and I won my first year. But my daughter would be like, oh no, these people think that I can't do it. So I can't do it. So you have to know what might motivate someone might actually just totally deflate someone else. Differences in your children, and what kind of how they react to certain types of stimuli in that case, because a coach might say something, another athlete might say something, and for one kid it's like, okay, I'm going to show you, and it might spur them on even more, but the other one it might be like, oh, okay, I can't do that.
I think that's an important point, is that it doesn't necessarily always come from other athletes. It might come from coaches, or it might come from other athletes' parents. We've also seen that happen. And I think that I can only speak for us, and what we do with our children is we take it step by step, and we take a little step of, okay, my son suffering a little bit with confidence a couple of years ago. And so it wasn't necessarily about building his confidence within the sporting arena. It was about building his confidence as a little boy, and how could we do that? So we chose to put him into clubs that he could find success in and be, validated in for what he was doing, where he wasn't necessarily getting that in his sporting arena. Like chess club, or something that wasn't necessarily related, and then looking at confidence as a whole as opposed to confidence in the arena of just the sport that he's chosen to do.
That's a great point, actually. And I've always thought, we as parents, when we're moving our kids from team to team, trying to get them to excel or go up a level, I think the approach is totally wrong. I think we should be picking a coach that's right for our child, that's going to help to build that confidence. Who cares about AAA? Put him in house league, put him in A or whatever it is, so that child can build confidence. And then I think you'll see the child flourish. But I think a lot of us parents chase that higher level, not for the benefit of the child. You know, I've seen it when I'm coaching, parents have to have that child on that AAA team. And no matter how you explain to the parent, he is not ready for this level. If he goes to AA or AA, he's going to do better. He's going to build confidence. And then when that child is ready to come up, he's going to be emotionally and mentally ready. So I think there's a lot of fault that should fall on the parents. And the other point there that you mentioned, Hayley, is the coach. What kind of coach would do that to a child? We base our coaches on, on
The coach that
they
said it to me and made me win provincials because he
And it's so natural for it to happen. I'm going to say, for our experience, it was a little different. Like, we ended up in the sport by default, I say, because we weren't striving for anything. I say that, we got proposed to and we got married, and we didn't even get proposed to. We didn't even say,
That's
right? Like, it was just like, okay, let's try this. And then before we knew it, we were in a whole world. And, I think I said in our previous segment that had I chosen a sport, I didn't want competitive sports. Hence why my kids started gymnastics late, because I wasn't going to be the one. That's why I didn't pick a team sport, because I wasn't going to be the one that had my kids sitting on the side. Anyhow, however, I realized it wasn't until I got into it in the early stages, and there was a lot of comparison between the athletes. This one's doing this, and it was supposed to motivate them. And yeah, you're right, Hayley. It doesn't motivate all athletes. My kids were never motivated by comparison. What my kids wanted to do was they wanted to just do what they did. So when they started to get to the high levels, I started to clue in to the fact that, okay, well, if they're going to be able to survive this environment with all this noise around them, I'm going to have to teach them how to focus on competing against themselves and themselves only, to doing their personal best. And that was still my message today. There is no competition with anybody else but yourself. So it helped eliminate, at least for my children, every child's different, it helped eliminate all the other noises going on around them.
Do you think that there's more pressure on kids in individual sports versus team sports?
I
I want to
think,
say yes.
yeah, I would want to say yes too, because I feel like it's so personal. It's so, it feels like it's sitting right on their shoulder. Whereas with the team, and again, I didn't play any sport growing up at any high level, so I can't really say. I'm only looking in from as a parent. I think you can reason with the fact on a team sport, you can reason with the fact that everybody shares, some responsibility to that team. But when it's an individual sport, I mean, to me, it's black or white. It's for them, you either did good or you didn't. You fell off the beam or you didn't. And that weighs heavy on some kids. And to speak to that, like, every kid's different. Some kids can just take that and have it fuel them for their next thing, and other kids are just kind of flattened by that. So I really think that an individual is tougher.
I would say it generally that, and when you said it, I shook my head yes, and then I kind of went, wait a minute. Gymnastics at NCAA level as a team sport, and there was far more pressure on the athlete if you're in the lineup, because it's like 6 people are up and 5 scores count. So like it took my daughter the whole year to adjust to that, because if she fell, that means the team score is right. And if the person right before her fell, if she fell, then they were counting a fall. So the pressure was so high for her. She like, if somebody before her fell, she would like freak out, like, okay, now like I can't fall. And then you start thinking about falling. So that, guess what you do? You fall. So she actually had to put headphones on and face away from anybody who went just before her and not look at the score. So she would just go up and do her routine. The pressure was immense. And that was a team sport, but it's not a team sport like soccer. Like you're all like at that moment, your contribution is part of the team score. And if you fall, or if you have a big wobble, you know, the team scores down by 0.2, you don't win that meet, or, you know, or you don't qualify for regionals or whatever. So that was a team sport, but I think it's a different kind of team sport because it's individual and you add it up. But I would say that she had a hard time adjusting to that team sport. Whereas back here in elite, if she fell, yeah, she screwed up for herself. So she didn't impact anybody else. And, you know, part of that confidence is, you know, is letting other people down. So I think it was the fact that if she fell in that team environment, the way they scored is that she would let the team down, the coaches down, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And there's also a piece in it, I'm just going to switch gears a little bit, especially for girls. I don't know, I don't have boys, so I can't speak on behalf of boys, but they start out these sports at a young age, they're kids. Then they go through puberty and their body changes. And they have to adjust. Now, I know in gymnastics, if you're, you know, 3.5 feet tall and you're doing a crazy skill on beam, it's nothing. But now put yourself as a teenager who has grown and you're now, you know, close to 5 feet, and you're expected to do those same skills on the same 4-inch beam. Your gravity is off, your whole body's off. It is, and these kids, they're going through hormone changes. They don't know how to express, they don't even know what's going on. It's really tough on them.
Yeah, the body image is definitely something that I think as parents that we have to be aware of, because a lot of bullying happens around that. But also, you know, people, it can be a huge kind of downer on them and, you know, valuing themselves. And, you know, young girls grow into being women, and that it happens, right? So you can't really stop that. And you just need to be comfortable, and we need to be there supporting them, letting them know that, you know, you may not have the body type that, let's say, the judges would like to see. You may be more muscular, right? I remember myself as a gymnast, very, very muscular, very low. I wish I had that body now, by the way, but very, you know, like my body fat percentage was quite low. It went into the anorexic, but I wasn't anorexic. I was just very muscular. And I remember when the Lycra leotards came out and you could see all the cuts in my stomach, I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to wear it. And it turned out for that stomach a lot, but like I was
still have it?
embarrassed about so embarrassed about my body, and I really didn't want people to see my body, because I thought it was, you know, back then, you know, the image of, you know, what's feminine was not what I looked like. And I would hear people make comments about, you know, parts of my body being too muscular. And, you know, things have changed, thank goodness. We recognize that, you know, beauty comes in, you know, all different sizes, colors, shapes, muscularities. And it's, you know, we can't define masculinity and femininity in such rigid standards, but that can really, really impair your self-image when there's judgment about, you know, your body type, masculinity, femininity. It's a big deal. And I think that that's the thing that our kids maybe will not come to us and tell us, and you have to be there to observe it, and you have to somehow make sure that that's not the item that or the, the thing that's, pulling them down, because you there's very little you can do about, you're born with a certain body type, and that's your body type.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I really feel for these young ladies, these young girls. I think they're being bombarded with social media and this perfect body. And, you know, I see it in my own house. My 11-year-old, you know, she talks about stuff like this. And, you know, I grew up with 3 boys in my family. And, you know, and when we grew up, body shaming really, unless you're from Jamaica, they don't hold back there. But I you know, now I have these young girls. I gotta say, it breaks my heart to see young girls worrying about, you know, being overweight or being underweight or being too muscular. And, you know, again, in hindsight, if I could roll back the clocks and as a, you know, having young girls, I don't know what I would have done differently, but I probably would have talked about it more. You know, everybody's got what they've got. And, you know, you're made this way. You got to love it. Because I think those things that happen to these young girls are lifelong, and they will always have that in the back of their mind. And it's a real shame, a real shame. I think women have it hard enough in today's world, right? And I'll be honest, I didn't realize this until I got married. Women have the road harder in a lot of aspects. And now being the father of 2 girls, I'm very conscious of it. I'm very protective of it. And you know, I always think, how can I improve this and protected them from this body image crap that's going on in the world? I don't know. You guys can let me know.
Well, one of the things that that I did, because obviously I kind of said that example of myself, right, feeling not ashamed of my body, but is the power of positive images, right? So here are some amazingly successful people that look like you. So when it comes to the body shaming, it's like putting those positive images in front of them so that they realize that maybe whoever's chirping in their ear or on social media, that's not the be all and end all. Here are some people that have been quite successful and look like you, maybe talk like you, maybe have the same body type as you, so that they feel that they're not this unicorn out there. Well, unicorn's positive, but like I don't know what the opposite of a unicorn is, but this negative unique thing that's out there, they're actually people that are like them, that are successful, right?
An opportunity to look at somebody else, right?
We missed the first part that you said there.
Agree that giving them role models to see and to mirror themselves after, I guess, that look like them or have the same shape as they do, and how successful you can be, because that's not, well, I don't know if it's a determining factor in gymnastics. It's certainly not a determining factor in soccer. I mean, my 2 girls couldn't be different in their body types. And I guess it's just a sport that I don't think that comes into play as much.
I know gymnastics it does, because there's a lot of emphasis on weight, for the tumbling, and
Yeah.
It's all about what you eat, and it's
injuries too, right?
Right, because of the impact. And I gotta say, honestly, I just said to him, I've never really stood. I mean, if my kids weren't in gymnastics, the household they came from was, I always focused on nutrition and health. So I certainly didn't, I certainly was grateful for that. So when they got into it, it was all about, just eat like you normally would, and don't listen to all the noise of everybody else. You'll be fine. So I was fortunate in that sense. But there was definitely body shaming from a different end, only from other athletes, that it wasn't kind. And I was fortunate that they didn't listen, but it doesn't happen for everybody, right? want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what it looks like for them mentally when they are expected to perform. We've got, provincials coming up, we've got nationals coming up, we've got all these events coming up, and what kind of pressure these kids put on themselves, to perform, like what in preparation to those events. What are some of your experiences, the kind of pressures they put on themselves, unnecessary pressure, that is?
Who's going to tackle that?
Well, I would say that there's no pressure, no amount of pressure that, at least in the later years for both my kids, my daughter especially, there is no amount of pressure that anyone else could put on her that's greater than the pressure she had put on herself or that they can put on themselves. So part of helping them adjust to managing that pressure is for me was bringing them back to reality, right? Making it very objective. So rather than subjective, right? Here are the things that you've done. Here is what you're capable of. You've put in the work. So just really remind them of all of the things, all of the preparation they've done, all of the unique skill sets that they bring to the table that would enable them to be successful. Because I think when the pressure's on, like again, they start focusing on the negative, and they forget all of the amazing things that they've done, all the training that they've put in. And so it's bringing them back to reality as opposed to the fear and the, all of the negative what ifs, scenarios that are racing through their mind. So that's what we did.
Just to go back to what Sean, you were saying at the very beginning about having them enjoy the journey before a big competition or a camp or a tryout or whatnot. It is that bringing them back and saying, okay, you know what, this is your time to go and enjoy that, right? You've put in the work, you've, put in the hours of training and whatnot, that you need to enjoy the journey. You need to enjoy the experience of being at the camp or being at the tryout or being with the other players. Because when you look back on it, when you're, older and you look back on your time in sports, you want to be able to look back and say, you know what, I did enjoy the journey of getting to wherever they get to, whether it's a scholarship or whether it's a pro team or whatnot. But at some point you do retire from the sport. And I would hope that you could look back on that experience and say, you know what, if I was to do it again, I would do it again the same way, because I did enjoy, the little steps. I did enjoy and take time to be present and enjoy whatever it is that they're doing. With my daughter, my eldest daughter, she's traveled around the world with her sport. And the last thing we say to her every time she gets on a plane is, this is your first time wherever, like in Japan, or this is your first time in, Uruguay or whatnot. Like, enjoy it. Take time to breathe and take it in, because there's only one first time for everything. And you want to be able to look back and say, you know what, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's, trying to bring it back to the whole reason that we started this to begin with was, to have fun, to make friends, to meet new people. And just try and ground them in the fact that they've prepared, they're ready, and now it's their time to just go out there and enjoy the moment. I know it's easier said than done, but that I remember having many of these conversations, actually calculating the amount of hours that my daughter had trained in the gym, and trying to relate that to you've put in your time. Now let's let that rest, and let's just go out there tomorrow and have a good time, and really just show them what you've got and what those hours of training has transpired to. Hard to do some days.
I can agree.
Yeah.
I remember saying to our kids all the time is, what's the worst that can happen? You fell off the beam, you lost a game, so what? We're still going home together. We're still going to stop at McDonald's or whatever. So what? You did your thing, you had some fun. You're going to get to do this again. It's not the end of the world. So I used to play that worst scenario card all the time. And the worst scenario isn't that bad. I know you want to do well, but you'll get another opportunity. And your biggest fear, one day you're going to look back on it. It's going to be in the rearview mirror. Enjoy it. Have some fun. And I don't know how much pressure it relieved, but I think just comforting them, knowing that, we're going to be here when this is done. I'm not going to think any less of you. I don't think your coaches are. Let's go have some fun. Forget it. Right.
I remember, I'm going to echo that. I think that the kids have to learn to trust that though. So I think that they have to go out and make that mistake or, fall off the beam and then get back into that car and be like, yeah, okay, well, it is what it is. Life goes on and just pick yourself up and move forward. And I think that was when my children started to realize and trust that we weren't defining them based on that performance or any performances. We were actually, like Hayley, you talked about that supporting role. It became easier, I think, for them to go in. Their biggest pressure again was on themselves. It was like, okay, well, and they had to go through it and giving them that space, developing that strong mental resilience internally was giving them that space to work out those emotions on their own and be there to support them. I found in the later years, I got onto that a little bit late, but, because in the beginning, I can't say that that's how I responded. But when I did clue into that, it just made it a little bit easier. And it made it about themselves. Like it wasn't trying to cushion and sugarcoat or anything. It was just about just being there, allowing them to go through that process. Because behind the scenes for us, it was like, this is your life. As you guys say, there's an end to the sport. You can leave the sport. Do you want to leave now? Do you want to leave now? So when they were fighting to stay in, when my one, child was fighting to stay in, it was because she wanted to stay in. Because believe me, you guys all know what the hours are going into any high performance sport. It doesn't matter what sport you're in. And it's not just about the sport, it's everything that goes with it. The chiro, the this, the that, everything that goes with it. So you're kind of like, all right, are we done now?
Can we have our 30 hours back?
Right.
Yeah.
So
you know what? There's one thing I do want to say from my own experience, right? My dad, he worked like a maniac. He worked, I barely saw him. My mom would take me to my games. My mom would take me home. But I remember as young as 8 to 10 years old, I put, like Hayley mentioned, I was the one putting all the pressure on myself. And I always would look out from the field and see my dad in the parking lot watching. The game would end and he'd be gone. And I would see him at home and he would never say a word to me. He would say good game and that was about it. But for me, knowing that I wasn't going to face any kind of ridicule or anything like that, and knowing that he believed I was good at my skill and my sport was enough for me, really. And it really carried me through those tough times. He never once said a word. Never, you didn't do this or didn't do that. I get home, you say, hey, good game, and that was it. And I remember driving home from hockey and looking over at other parents in the car. They're driving like this and they're yelling at their kid in the back seat. And okay, I've had some of those moments too.
Did Lisa's face give it away?
I know she's doing one of these. I've had a few of those.
We drive two cars to most events. Yeah.
Let me be honest. The times that I really get upset, let me defend myself. The times that I got upset were, for me, was lack of effort. That I had a hard time with. I really had a hard time with. If they got there and they weren't trying, I was like, what are we doing this for? So that's my defense, and I'll leave it at that.
Opposite of my son, because it would be like we had those drives home, and I remember we were at a camp, and it was funny. Dane, I can't remember what's his last name. He played for Maryland, and now he's he's playing pro ball in the US. And so we were at camp together, and it was funny because we were talking about the ride home, and the Jamaican fathers or the West Indian fathers kind of doing the lecture in the car, and the kids are like rolling their eyes like, I don't want to hear this. But there came to be a point where my son would, if my husband would say, yeah, it was okay game, he'd be like, no, you need to tell me, like, what's your assessment of the game? Like, tell me, like, so he would actually go asking for it.
Brilliant.
He was no longer okay with, okay, good game. It's like, let's sit down and talk about it. Like, okay, what about in the first half? Like, how did this go? What do I need to do differently? What do I need to ask my teammates? Like, so he would actually want the analysis. But early on, it was the ride home, and it was like, we'd be like all sitting in the car. It's like, oh God, we have to sit in the car with Daddy now, and Daddy's going to tell us this, and Daddy's going to tell us that, and we're going to be like, oh God, right?
That's why Lisa and Sean
They wanted it, like Andrew ran for it, and if he just got an okay or a good game, that was not going to be okay. He wanted the full.
Oh, that's funny.
There was a young man that I coached, and it's a sad story. Like, I remember we played a game, and this kid was a great athlete, and we score a couple goals. He would score 2 goals, and then on the third opportunity for a goal, he hit the post. And we were elated with the kid. He was just great. And there were numerous times that young man would be in the dressing room absolutely sobbing and refusing to leave the dressing room. And first couple times it happened, you couldn't figure out what was going on, but he was afraid to face his father. And that young man, great athlete, he just kind of withered away, and never really progressed, has no relationship with his father anymore. But it's definitely, we as parents obviously have a huge impact on them, and I think we can help pick the direction they go, right? You go right or you go left, and it's all about how we handle it. So these talks are amazing.
They are. It's important that we help each other out along the way.
Yeah.
So we've got about 8 minutes left, and really, I want each of you guys to be able to give our audience a chance. One piece of advice that you feel you can give our audience for anybody that's entering the arena. I know we're in COVID times, so we will come out of COVID and we'll start back up again. What is the one advice that you can give to help keep your kids mentally stable, like to be that support, to keep your kids mentally stable when they're, expected to perform in high performance based environments?
I think it's been the common theme, but I think Sean mentioned it early at the beginning that we won't even think about it, spend money on the best equipment and the best chiro and this and that and all that, but very little time invested in helping them with their their mental state. So whether it's through a performance coach or whether it's just having a good check-in and making sure that they're grounded and that there's nothing running in the background that is causing some filters to go through their head every day. I think that would be the biggest advice I would give a new family moving into this arena. It's tough, whether it's pressure put on by themselves or pressure put on by the team or rituals that they have built into their lifestyle to get them through their day. There needs to be a check-in because that can run away from you really quickly.
I think for me, the advice would be to make sure that the child, the athlete, was the one that was choosing. Like still now with our kids at the levels that they would play, twice a year we have the conversation. Do you want to continue this? Are you having fun and are you enjoying it? Irrespective of the success that they've had, because they change, and their goals and their wants and their passions change as they go through their teenage years and whatnot. So we always have those check-ins with them to make sure that they're doing this for their own reasons and they're not doing this for our reasons or the parents' reasons or the coaches' reasons or whatnot, that this is something that they're choosing to do and making sure that they're having fun doing it.
Yep, and I would say on our end, it's really about making sure that they have confidence in what they're doing. And then the reminder, I would always say, don't let perfection be the thing that's stopping you from achieving your goals, because sometimes they get that tunnel vision and they strive so much for perfection that it actually stops them from doing much of what they're capable of doing. So I'd always just say, don't let perfection be the thing that stands in the way of your success. And, that's what I would say, remind, parents when they see, a child, striving so hard and having that tunnel vision and not meeting their, the success that goes along with their abilities, is just make sure that they understand that, it doesn't have to be perfection, and perfection can be that thing that stops them from actually enjoying the success that they're capable of.
I think for me, I'm kind of repeating some of the great points that everybody made, but it's communicating, understanding your child, and getting constant feedback, like Karen mentioned, on where they're at in the sport mentally, where they are confidence-wise, their view of the sport, and them participating in the sport. And I think it all boils down to communicating and going from there. And Hayley mentioned this as well too. You got to be their supporter, right? We advocate for our kids all the time, but you got to be the listener. You got to support, and it's communication for me.
All right. I don't know what I think I would echo all of you guys. The one thing that's coming to my mind that's really out there is, and only because I've embraced it as a lifestyle practice for myself, is, meditation and mindfulness and deep breathing. That somehow I feel like yoga or something should be incorporated into all of these high level sports. Anything, actually, for anything in schools, academically, it should just be something we teach our kids. Especially in this, because it helps ground themselves. I remember Phil Jackson when he was having challenges for the coach for the LA Lakers, and he was having challenges with Kobe and Shaq on the team. And I remember they had said he had done these unorthodox things with the team, which was doing that sort of stuff. And that's what made the LA Lakers during that time, really, the team itself, really come together in a great way. And look what it did for the team. So if there's something that I'm advocating for at this stage of the game where mental health is concerned, is to add that component of some sort of, mindfulness, meditative yoga type practice, coupled with, I agree with you, Lisa, that we spend tons of money on all kinds of equipment and everything else. We do not spend the time investing in that mental component where we're hiring, sort of somebody to walk alongside them from a mental therapy perspective to keep them grounded and keep them, just to really check in and teach them how to understand what they're going through the process. Because I think a lot of it is when they understand what they're going through, they know how to maneuver around situations when crises arise, conflicts arise. So that's I know, it's like, okay. No, it was great, guys. It was really great. Thank you very much for, it's a big panel tonight. And thank you for joining me tonight and just kind of sharing everything that you guys go through with your children. I know we didn't reveal everything, but I think that the audience gets the gist that, of how we can help support our children in these sports, checking in, communicating. I'm really letting it be about them and their journey, and knowing that they don't have to stay in it. It doesn't define them. I think those are key, important things to walk away from. That's going to mentally keep them in that space, that they don't have to do it, and that we're there for them.
Yeah.
So thank you again, guys. Thank you. So again, we have Karen Rose, Physio Function. You can find her on Instagram and Facebook. under Karen Rose. You can also find Lisa and Sean Gonsalves Home. Real estate, you can find them under Facebook and Instagram, Gonsalves Homes, and you can find Hayley Deans under CANUSAstudy, also on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find me, Tanya Ricketts, on Tanya Ricketts 4 on Facebook and Instagram. So did I get everybody? I did.
You did.
You guys,
Good
thank you
job.
for tuning in out there, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week where we can continue this conversation right here on Tanya Talks. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.